We are all one human family. That's a nice idea, isn't it? It's a nice thing to say. And I think that what I want to tell you this morning is how I've always viewed the world and the people around me. And I want to see if you can relate to it. All right. Samuel's going to flip some switches back here. When I was a kid, my mom would take me to a church, and the church that my mom took me to is fine. The church is a great church, and it does a lot of good for a lot of different people, okay? So I always want to make clear that I'm not talking bad about that. But one of the things that I noticed when I was little, but the church that we went to, we were a group of people, an isolated group of people, and all the people in our group thought that we were all right and that we knew the way, and that all the other groups of people that were around all over the place didn't. And it seemed like there were people from different countries, there were people from different ethnic backgrounds, people with different skin colors, people that went to different churches, people that were in different religious organizations. It just seemed like everywhere I went, everywhere I looked around me, all there was different this, different that, different this. And I had this vision of everybody in these little pods. I don't know why I call them pods, but I do. It's like all these different pods, and everybody was separated. And I never could really figure it out, because what happens is, like, there was a father and there was a son, and they were talking one day, and the little boy says, well, Dad, what happens when somebody joins our group? And he said, oh, son, that's a convert. That's a real smart, that's a good thing. And he says, well, what happens if somebody decides that they want to be in another group, or they make another decision? He says, that's a traitor. That's bad. It's this whole mentality of you're on my team or you're on the other team. And so I try to figure out that why people do that, because it didn't make any sense to me. And it still doesn't make any sense to me today. I try to figure out why people would do that. We get together in these pods. We get together in these groups because we have a sense of fellowship. We have a sense of safety. We have a sense of security. We have a sense of camaraderie, because like-minded people, people from the same place, people that dress the same, people that like the same things, they all have a tendency to get together and hang out, and that's just natural. But what happens is when we do this, when we say yes to a pod, or when we say yes to a group, what we don't sometimes get is that we're saying no to all the other ones. See, it becomes a yes to this little group, but it becomes a no to all the other groups. And I think that's where I know with myself, that's where I've gotten into trouble in the past. There's this funny story that I like to tell that I read that a fellow by the name of Osho told, and it's about a guy who was on a boat. He went out on his boat one day and he got stranded on a deserted island. So here he is, Sam. He's stranded. He's all alone. And after a couple of days, he figures out, oh my gosh, I'm stuck here. So the guy had a lot of spirit, and what he decided to do was he decided that he had to keep himself busy. And so he decided to build his own little town. It just kind of started out. He built him a place to live, and then he thought, well, I'll build another place over here. And then before long, he had just built this whole block of all these places. Well, one day the guy wakes up, and there's a rescuer there. There's another guy there. He's got a boat, and he's really happy that the guy's there to rescue him. But he says, right when they're about to leave, he says, I got to show you my town. I've been here for so long, and I made this whole town, and it really I know you think I'm crazy, but I need to show you this before we go. So he gives the rescuer the tour of the town, and then they get in the boat and they're heading back to the mainland. And the rescuer says, "I got to ask you a question. I gotta ask you something." And the guy who had been stranded said, "Okay." And he says, "You gave me a tour of your town, and there was a church, there was your house, there was a post office, there's a grocery store, there's a police station, there's a bar, there's a church. So I understand the church on one side of town, but why do you got two churches? It's the only thing you got two of." And the guy said, "Oh, well, that church, the first church I showed you, that's the church that I go to. But the second church I showed you, that's the one I don't go to. That's the bad one over there." Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? And what we have come to understand is that the self, the ego, cannot survive without the other one. It's got to be the other one. Got to be the one that we don't go to. Right? So when we realize this, when we realize that when we get on one team and then we say no to all the other ones, we can start really thinking about this, and we can start making adjustments. Because I'll be honest with you, I hang out with people that like the same things that I do. I hang out most of the time, if I'm hanging out with anybody, it's Ryan and Russell, because we play music together. That's what we do. You hang out with people you work with. You hang out with people that you do stuff with. You hang out with your family. And that's just the way it is. But what I'm talking about here is this mentality that we get into whenever we do need to deal with somebody. One of the most powerful story, as you all know, is the story of Jesus on the cross. When Jesus was crucified, they made him carry this heavy cross. They were cursing him. They were throwing stones at him. I mean, it was bad. And if you can think about it, if you can imagine, it's not really a pleasant thing to imagine. And I'm not going to go into all the gruesome details. I'll spare you all that. But if you can imagine in your mind Jesus on the cross, hanging on the cross, nailed to the cross, looking down at the people who were doing this to him. And I want to remind you, this is Jesus. This is a man who can raise the dead. This is a man who's done all these miracles, miracle after miracle. And here he is. He ain't got to be up here, I don't think. He doesn't have to be there. But he looks down on the people, and what does he say? He says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." That's what he says. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't see. They don't hear. They don't know. Now, I'm not here today to try to convince anybody of anything, and I'm not affiliated with any church or any particular belief. So all I'm here to do is to carry the message of Spirit and to carry the message of God. Just like Sam told me one time when I was talking to him, I said, "Well, what kind of church is this? What is your thing? What are your guidelines here?" And he looked at me and he said, "Kyle, I just want to tell people about God. That's it. That's the only guidelines we got." And that's why I come to the Tybee Church, is because we just want to tell people about God. That's it. God is all. And all is God. If God is anybody's God, God has to be everybody's God. God's just not my pod's God. It doesn't work like that. God belongs to, God is all of our gods. So the same thing I saw as a child is the same thing I see today in the world. People separating out into different pods. And all I want to do is say to you this morning that maybe people are in different groups, and maybe somebody does go to a different church, and maybe somebody is a Democrat and you're a Republican, or maybe you're a Republican and another person's a Democrat, maybe whatever it is. But what we got to realize, what I have to realize, is that we are all children of God. All of us. It don't matter what team you're on. And I got to know, because see, we're all alike. It don't matter if it doesn't matter where you're at in the world. It doesn't matter what your living situation is. It does not matter who you are. You are a spirit, and you are in a human body, having a human experience here. We are all having the same thing going on here. So we got to love each other. When I look at you, when I look at another person, I see God. If you speak a different language, I see that you're a child of God. If you're a different color, I see that you're a child of God. If you don't like me, if you got something against me, I see that you're a child of God. If you're on my team, I see that you're a child of God. All of us, everywhere. Quite often when I'm talking on this subject, people ask me questions about how to handle different situations that come up when people may be aggressive towards us, or when people may be violent, or when we have to deal with different things. And my favorite answer is something that Pema Chodron teaches. She's a real popular Buddhist teacher that travels all around the world, and she teaches peace and communication, teaches people how to communicate with one another peacefully no matter what they believe. And one of the things that she said one time that I wrote down in my notebook is, I may need to imprison someone in order to protect myself from them. In other words, what she's talking about is, I'm allowed to have boundaries with people. I'm allowed to do that. But she says, just because I have boundaries between me and somebody else doesn't mean I have to close my heart off to them. And it's very powerful. It's a very powerful lesson. So we are all one human family. We are all people. And let us open our hearts to other people, especially the people who are different than us, especially to the people who have different beliefs than us, especially to the people that have different ideas and belong to different groups. God is all, and all is God, and we are all one human family. Oh yeah.